It is that time again in the order they were played. Here are 9 JRPGs I've been playing over the past 4 months. But first, a word from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Wandering Sword. Wandering Sword is a turn-based HD 2D wuxia-style RPG set in ancient China. Developed in Unreal Engine, it uses beautiful pixel art to showcase an open world with bustling ancient Chinese towns, scenic mountains, picturesque rivers, and treacherous terrain. You take on the role of a young swordsman caught in a feud between rivaling factions, and as you explore the vast lands, you'll be student to hundreds of different martial arts forms to master, along with a host of different weapon types to grow stronger. Wandering Sword presents this through its turn-based combat system, but with a twist. Combat is conducted on a tiled board, but it also allows players to switch between turn-based mode or real-time mode during combat. The turn-based mode will suit gamers who prefer the traditional way of playing slower-paced RPGs, while the real-time mode will appeal to players who are more in tune with action RPGs. Wandering Sword has just released today on the 15th of September. Check out the link in the description for their Steam page if you're interested. In addition, the creators of Wandering Sword are giving away exclusive Steam keys to the full game, an awesome opportunity if I do say so myself. If you're as excited about this game as I have been, simply head over to the Wandering Sword Twitter page to join in on the fun and stand a chance to play the game for free. You'll find a link to their Twitter page in the video description below. And now, back to the video. Starting with Fire Emblem Engage, that took me just over 50 hours to beat. Coming out right near the beginning of the year, Engage had a lot of hype attached to it by virtue of being a mainline title and quite a few memes to boot. In this game you play as the Divine Dragon, a worshipped deity that has been asleep for 1,000 years. When you wake up, you have lost your memory and eventually go on a grand journey with your devoted followers. Now, up till I played Engage, there was not one Fire Emblem game that I've played that I have subsequently disliked. And that pattern still remains. I enjoyed Engage in parts. Initially, its gameplay has to be one of, if not the best iteration we've seen thus far. The use of additional attacks and the ability to disarm opponents to prevent them from retaliating just adds yet more to the strategic foundation that makes up this series, but what allows it to stand above the rest is the use of the emblems, vessels that hold the spirits of recognisable heroes from the previous games. It's a star-studded roster as well, and it wouldn't surprise me if Engage's secondary purpose was to get players to check out the older games. Not at these prices though. In truth though, the emblems are such a good addition, each with their own skills, abilities, and they can be equipped to pretty much anyone, so you can play however you want. There's a staggering amount of flexibility on offer, and you'll be able to experiment with emblem pairings in your hub, the Somnial. This is where most of the downtime takes place between the missions and functions similar to the monastery from Three Houses. All the characters show up here, as do the emblems, and this is where you also get to see the optional support interactions, and there's a lot of them. But this is another highlight of the game, because a fair few of these characters are really good, genuinely enjoyable dialogue and delivery on display for most of the interactions. Goldmary, for example, is a quintessential narcissist, one of my least favourite archetypes for a character. But she's so on the nose that I found myself coming full circle and actually liking her.
I love to make the dishes sparkle. Each polished plate rewards me with a view of my own scintillating smile.
And then the emblems like Ike, for example, well, he's as sassy as they come.
They say that a good smile is contagious, you know. You should try smiling more often.
Okay, I'll try that sometime.
In truth, most of my playtime was dedicated to unlocking as many of these as I could. There's no doubt in my mind that Engage does well in certain areas, I am not denying that. However, now we move to the story. I place massive importance on this, always have, and Engage's story is not good. It's not absolutely awful, but it's poorly executed to say the least. For example, there are inconsistencies with cutscenes that show early on, suggesting that it is a window to the future of some kind, but you never see it again. I also am not a fan of being the Divine Dragon.
Wait, yo? You're telling me the Divine Dragon is here, in my desert? No kidding?
Yes.
I had no idea. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to be rude.
As a recognised deity, you are loved and respected by everyone. I felt like a Japanese idol going around the world. People would bow to me and shower me with praise for simply raising a finger. And yeah, I get it. If I saw the Queen of England walking down the street, God rest her soul, I'll show respect too. But still, I'm not a fan of having praise given to me for just existing. I'd rather earn it through my actions, call me old-fashioned. But the real kicker is the actual motivation for the journey in the first place. Here's a spoiler warning, so skip ahead if you want. Engage's story depends heavily on its relationships with two characters, for they form the springboard for the trajectory of the story. The underlying problem though is that there is nowhere near enough development or time given to these relationships to make them relatable or believable. For instance, this character here is your mother, but the amnesiac divine dragon has no reason to believe that this is true. There is no proof. Yet when she bites the dust one fight later, we're bawling our eyes out and saying we'll go on this journey for her. Why? By all intents, I barely know this person outside of her saying we're related. Why all the emotion? I know for a fact that if I had amnesia and my dad came up to me in the hospital stating that
I am your father,
I would have a hard time believing him, at least show me a picture. And then they use the same method for a later development, but it once again falls flat because I exchanged maybe 2 lines of dialogue with this character. Engage feels all over the place in terms of what it's going for, as if they wanted to keep the serious vibes of the prior games but also look to appeal to younger audiences too. The reality though is you cannot mix them because you get results like this. Either you stick to a Sunday morning cartoon premise or you go full on berserk. And for that reason, while I will say Engage was a great game in terms of its gameplay and characters, it ended up being a disappointing experience overall because of its lackluster narrative, in a series where I expect and have seen so much better. It's by no means a bad game, in fact it's brilliant in areas, but for me, a letdown in the area that matters most. The next game I played was the original Blue Reflection, which took me around 20 hours to beat. Originally released in September 2017 for the West on both PS4 and PC, I made a promise to myself that I would play this game after having such a good time with Blue Reflection Second Light. And much like its sequel, the original Blue Reflection excels in similar aspects. In this title you join Yuzu, Lime and Hinako as they live out a seemingly normal life as high school students, and is focused mainly around the aftermath of an injury sustained by Hinako, who earlier on in her life was an internationally recognised dancer. Blue Reflection is centred around how she deals with it, how she interacts with others in lieu of that experience, and it becomes the basis of a fairly engaging and relatable protagonist. But thanks to Yuzu and Lime, she's granted the abilities of a reflector. This power allows her and the other two to solve the problems of their classmates in their free time, problems often caused by out-of-control emotions. By delving into the other world, the source of these ailments, and reflecting on the emotions of the troubled individual, Hinako is able to not only assist them but deepen her bond with said person, which also doubles as power for her as a reflector. As simple as it sounds though, that is part of the charm for Blue Reflection. Everything combines into a laid-back atmosphere that persists right till the end of the game, and I'm certain that part of that boils down to the game being very easy in that you would have to actively try and lose during battle. You see, there is no traditional leveling up. Instead, as Hinako, Yuzu and Lime help other students, they are rewarded with fragments which then allow them to allocate points to certain parameters, and they also double as a form of equipment to boost the effectiveness of abilities. The thing is though, if you spend ample time doing the side quests and optional events, you'll be far ahead of the curve in terms of where the main story expects you to be. And even if you were at parity, it's still very much on the easier side of the spectrum anyway. But I didn't mind that, because as said before, it all melds together as it should. This isn't a game that is designed to be stressful, it's all about the journey this time around, the growth of Hinako and the characters around her. A conscious design choice by producer Junzo Hosoi while developing the game. It's a game of relationships and acceptance, and thus it's meant to be more low-key in nature. The game nails that aspect. In truth though, Blue Reflection is more the basis and skeleton of what would later become the stronger sequel in Second Light. The original has plenty of elements in it, but quite a few of them feel lacking in depth. For instance, the optional events where you go on a date with other students, for example, boils down to going to the same areas and just exchanging dialogue. I think these would have been far better off if the number of events was reduced, but then the remaining ones were given more care, utilising actual cutscenes to bring those scenes to life. Quality over quantity. And then some mechanics don't seem to have any meaning, like the bathing. When Hinako goes home, you can choose to wash yourself off, but outside of a single line of dialogue, it does nothing else, and you have to think it might be there simply for fan service. If it was used as a way to say, look back at past events, or even listen to the excellent soundtrack in between days, then it would have had a clear purpose. But alas, it's just shallow. And though the combat itself is decent in terms of the options given as a turn-based RPG, the battles are often over so quickly that you don't get a chance to use everything in your arsenal. But overall, Blue Reflection was a good game. I'm happy that I got around to playing it, and I just hope that Gust may one day revisit it with another mainline entry. And since we're speaking about Gust, the next game on my list was Atelier Ryza 3, played on PC and taking me just over 45 hours to beat. It's the last of the Ryza trilogy, and it might even be the last of the traditional Atelier RPGs if Resliana ends up being a success. As the name suggests, we rejoin Ryza, Lent, Tau and the crew on their final adventure to save their home of Kirken Island. A mysterious force has caused islands to randomly appear, and it's left to the plucky alchemist to sort it out. Now straight away, I was a fan of what Ryza 3 was going for. It was intended as a coming-of-age adventure, a conclusion for the entire arc. Compared to the original game where Ryza and her friends are treated as pests, in this game they're seasoned adventurers. They've matured in many ways and everyone looks to them for guidance. It wastes no time then in showing how their lives have changed in a familiar environment. On top of that, Ryza 3 expanded the map massively into this semi-open world format where the zones themselves have doubled or tripled in size. It felt comparable to the maps from Atelier Firis in some ways, and as a result there's plenty to find. Quests have also been improved by a fair distance, with a fair few of them offering up optional mounts to traverse the world, and the excellent world quests will actually affect the land around you in tangible ways, so you can see the effect of your efforts. Combat is once again strong. It takes on the archetype seen in Atelier Ryza 2 with the ATB approach, where you can freely switch between members and also have a couple of support members to exchange with to extend combos further. To set itself apart though, Ryza 3 introduced keys, which can be found at various landmarks around the world, and they can be used for exploration, combat or alchemy itself. Needless to say, alchemy is also very good in this game, maintaining the foundation of previous games with its node-based system, but having a couple of new mechanics added on. For example, the aforementioned keys can fulfill certain requirements on a recipe, allowing you to delve deeper into a synthesis loop, or increasing the item's overall effectiveness when made. That being said, it is a very easy system to break as well. I would often be travelling very deep into zones early on just out of a need to explore the map fully. The game rewards you for this though with quality ingredients with endgame traits, meaning you can stack your stats very early on in the game. 10 hours in, I had everything I needed to see me through to the end of the game, which isn't a bad thing because it rewards those who want to explore. I've got no issue with the game being easy because of the choices I have made to get me to that point. But I did mention Atelier Ryza 3 in my long RPG videos about 2 or 3 weeks back, that I spent far less time on alchemy in this game because I didn't need to do much beyond those first 10 hours. Yet the game still took me the same amount of time to finish as the other 2 prequels. And the reason for that is its story. I noted earlier that I liked the direction that Ryza 3 was aiming for in terms of its premise, showing that the group have all matured greatly since their first journey. Yet that acts as a double-edged sword, because Ryza 3 leaves itself far too much to do. It wants to round out the character arcs of existing members in a satisfying way, but it also wants to do that for the new members too. I personally think Ryza 3 would have benefited far more from just having the existing cast return and not introducing anyone new. It would allow Gus to just focus on the journeys of the characters we were already familiar with and not drag its heels while doing it. That's the real issue for me. The story of Ryza 3 meanders, especially in the final quarter. Very minor progress from point to point, and you just wonder if it will ever end. That particular segment could have been easily cut by 5 hours and nothing would have been lost. In fact, I think it would have aided massively in the game's overall pacing, though I am happy to say that the ending was done well overall. Atelier Ryza 3 was not my favourite game in the trilogy. That honour still remains with the second game. It was a very good experience, but I couldn't help but feel that Gust were a little fatigued during this game, in that they were struggling to come up with a way to end the trilogy in a satisfying way, and the later parts of the game show that. It has to be said as well that upon its release, it had a fair few technical issues initially, like the need to disable options to remove the camera blur, localization issues with wooden dialogue, unfinished textures, and a notable amount of reused assets, especially with later boss models. And I think part of that was because Gust had split their development between this, Atelier Marie's remake, and the newest entry in Res Liana, spreading themselves a bit too thin as a result. It remains to be seen where the Atelier series will end up going forward, but I personally hope they do stick to these traditional adventure games, the ones that brought in a host of new fans. For even when Gust aren't at their best, they can still create relatable and enjoyable journeys within their flagship series. Moving on is the Nintendo Switch exclusive of Astral Chain, which took me just over 30 hours to beat. This is one I was looking to play for a long time, but I never got round to that till a couple of months ago. I am glad though that I finally found the time, because this is Platinum Games at their best, at least in terms of gameplay. In Astral Chain you play as one of two twins, with one acting as a self-insert protag, while the other is heavily linked to you throughout the story. The twins join a special police force that protects humanity from interdimensional creatures, a force that is captained by their father. From there you proceed through various missions connected to a linear story, with the station acting as your hub in between events. Now I've already mentioned this is Platinum Games at their best in terms of gameplay, and I'll reiterate it once more. The gameplay in Astral Chain is everything you would want in a fast-paced, action-centric combat system. The protagonist has light attacks, heavy attacks, dodges and so on, but you can also switch out to other weapons with their own skill sets too. But what really elevates this combat and allows it to stand out among the crowd is the control of the Legions. Legions are otherworldly beings that are put under the jurisdiction of certain officers, and through the course of the journey you'll get a whole host of them to work with. You can actively move these legions around the map, use them to traverse land at speed, and they each come with their own skill trees that yield unique abilities. The legions are without a doubt the best thing about this combat. It just pushes an already strong system to another level, combining movesets, using the chain to obstruct charging enemies, and of course showcasing all of that with flashy cinematic angles. That's another thing that has to be praised. The cinematography is so good in Astral Chain. Cutscenes that are well rendered and shot that easily bring you into the action. You know they're good when you still remember them months after playing, and in my case, I'll sometimes search up my favourite scenes again on YouTube just to experience them one more time. There's a good array of side content on offer within the missions themselves that rewards the players who choose to explore, ensuring that these self-contained maps feel a lot bigger than they really are. And I cannot forget the music, banging tunes near on all the way through to go with the excellent visuals and gameplay that keeps your adrenaline pumping. It's bloody awesome. Oh man, and that makes it hurt so much more to say this, but Astral Chain actually disappointed me by the end. Can you guess why that was? It's the story once again, and that really sucks because the narrative is absurdly good up till a certain point. I was so invested in everything going on and I couldn't wait to see how it all came together. But then it just completely falls apart in the final couple of missions, as if they ran out of time or they intended this as a part of a series rather than a standalone title. There are so many questions left by the end. You have to wonder if this was an intentional choice from the developers, with some characters portrayed as important early on being completely abandoned by the end, and an antagonist that flatters to deceive. All of that world building and depth was just squandered come the credits roll, and I just felt so let down by it because its setup was nigh on perfect. I haven't been so enamoured in a story for ages. This is Opus and Trails level of investment. I really hope they make a sequel. there is so much they could do with it, and no one's getting bored of the gameplay, I'll tell you that now. There's been no news on that unfortunately, but a man can dream, and I've no doubt it will be a hit if they were to do it. Regardless of my grievances though, Astral Chain is one of the must-buy action RPGs on the Switch. It's brilliant in so many areas, but if you're looking for a captivating story that leads to a satisfying payoff by the end, don't expect anything, you'll just set yourself up for disappointment. Next up was the 10th Trails entry in Trails into Reverie. I don't really need to say much here, I did a dedicated video on this a couple of years back, so I'll direct you to that if you want my full thoughts. TLDR though, it's an awesome game, one that can only happen in the Trails series, and demonstrates why it is so special and beloved by fans. The next game I played was the Atelier Marie remake on PS4, which took me just over 10 hours to beat. And what a great little game. I mentioned this before in my RPGs that nailed their atmosphere video, and for good reason. In Atelier Marie, you play as Marie, who is a flunking student in the prestigious Alchemist Academy of Solberg. As a method to steer her on the right course, she is offered an atelier and given 5 in-game years to turn her fortunes around by helping the citizens of the town, going on adventures and deepening her knowledge of alchemy at the same time. I've mentioned before that game limits aren't really my thing, and Marie does have that to replicate the original game, but there is also an unlimited mode here if you just want to progress at your own pace, and will be more recognisable for the players who were drawn into the series with the likes of Ryza. But the changes are minimal for the most part, even though it's a remake and was made to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the series, which I personally think was a very good idea considering it never came west before. I got the feeling that Marie was attempting to recapture the magic of the original to show how the franchise has evolved over the years. It's not like many modern titles in the series in that there's a focused narrative, rather it keeps the experience firmly focused around the journey and the alchemy. There were indeed some changes to bring that formula up to modern standards, like the aforementioned unlimited mode, but Marie's remake feels honest to its roots and celebrates them in many ways. It demonstrates that gameplay like this, if done correctly, is still as good as it was back then. Marie is all about reliving the past. And it does that really well. The gameplay loop is so simple in that you spend a lot of your time journeying outside the city to gather materials, but then coming back to the atelier to make the items themselves. Now there's not much complexity to the alchemy this time around, it simply boils down to if you have the ingredients, you can make the item, no grid layout like in the Mysterious games or node system from Ryza. But it works for Marie because this is a game designed to be finished in a couple of sittings, and I found I was quickly into the flow of unlocking more recipes and progressing to ever more dangerous gathering fields. That also extends to the combat, an easy to grasp turn-based system where many characters have a couple of abilities and it will become even more simple depending on what items you bring to battle. There's a good degree of replayability too, loads of characters to partner up with during that 5-year period, and certain events will also occur at particular points of the year, ensuring that you need to plan in advance. And some of these events will open up more events or even new areas if you partake in them, which can even lead to a unique ending, of which Marie has quite a number. All in all, Atelier Marie does the one thing I want and expect from this franchise. When I pop that disc in, I'm always of the impression that I will have a relaxing time with it, and Marie is no different. It caters to those looking for a palate cleanser, but will also do a lot for those who want an RPG with lots to do in it. One playthrough is more than satisfactory, but the option is there for those who want to see more as well. I do hope that Gust makes more of these, if not just to make their older titles more accessible, because they show that they understand what a remake should entail, at least on the scale of this series. It's not an opportunity to one-up or replace the old, it's more an opportunity to revisit and celebrate the roots, and Gust executed it very well. Next up on my list was Xenosaga Episode 1, which was voted for by my ever-amazing patrons as the next to be played for the Retro series. But because I have chosen now to play the whole trilogy and bring it all together in a video later down the line, I'm going to keep my thoughts to myself for now until I have completed the trilogy. This is more to just let you know that something is in the pipeline for it. Oh boy, and here we go. Next up was Loop 8 Supper of Gods, one of my most anticipated titles for the year, so much so that I bought the limited edition despite it not being available for EU regions. I was that excited for it. I played it on PC and it took me just over 13 hours to beat. Now before we even start the discussion, I want to share a quote from the developers as to what they wanted Loop 8 to be. Loop 8's emotion-driven AI system responds to every action you take and decision you make. Characters' emotions and stories will vary greatly depending on your choices, making each playthrough wholly unique. It was described as a game that weaves around your choices, one that is almost fluid in how it plays out, and this aspect of the game was marketed heavily in the trailers before its release. This idea of a constantly evolving AI system, which on paper sounds great. There's one issue with that though. It was a lie. We're going to discuss that later on, I assure you. Even more egregious is that it was aimed at the JRPG crowd. People looked at this and saw mechanics synonymous with the genre, like a focused story and turn-based combat. That was also a lie. Loop 8 is not an RPG. It's a dating/stat sim hybrid with some hollow RPG elements tacked on. And I say that because the ones that are there are so skeletal they may as well not be. For a TLDR, because we're going to be talking quite a bit about Loop 8, I noted down 3 good points for this game, which came to about a line each. I am going to get those out of the way first for the sake of brevity. It has a nice aesthetic with the whole anime look. Character designs are quite pleasing, and the OST is good, if not a bit small in scope. So there, I said some good things. Now as for the other side, those good aspects were countered by 13 bad points that were pretty much paragraphs when I wrote them out. I was in awe with how far off the mark it was. And the thing is, I was warned about this game. Friends of mine who are also content creators told me that Loop 8 was not good, but I'm stubborn. I'm always of the mind that a review is just the opinion of someone else, and the only person who will know if you will like a game is you yourself. There are many RPGs out there that people have loved that I haven't, and vice versa. I was hoping that Loop 8 would be another one of those, a title that wouldn't appeal to the masses, but I could latch onto in some way. Nope, the reviews are on the money this time around, no doubt about that. Now the world of Loop 8 is set in a world reminiscent of 1980s Japan, where humanity has been forced to the brink of extinction by the Kegai, which are manifestations of natural disasters like floods, infernos and droughts. Outside of a few pockets of civilization, the world has pretty much been overrun by this phenomena, with many humans escaping to colonies that orbit the planet. One such colony houses our protagonist, Nini, who has lived his entire life in space, but is now coming down to the town of Ashihara after his colony is destroyed by the Kegai, and as the only survivor, this event has given him a special power called Demon Sight, which allows him to see what others are thinking and how they feel. He moves in with his cousin and now lives out a typical summer to build his relationships with the residents of the town who will aid him in the coming battles. Now it sounds cool, I'll admit that, but the actual execution of that premise, how could they get this so wrong? It has one of the most monotonous gameplay loops ever. No joke, 90% of the time you are talking to other characters. On a time limit, you wake up, you go out into a small selection of areas, go to school, maybe, and then spend the rest of your time conversing with the other characters with the same cookie cutter options. By doing this, you build up your energy and stamina in varying ways, and the more you have, the more activities you can do in a day, and it also functions as health and MP for the later fights. Now the characters you talk to have one positive response and one negative. There is virtually no variation to that outside of these events you can sometimes go on if your relationship level is high enough. The actual response of the other character is also completely RNG based outside of a small quote from Nini saying how likely it will succeed. And apparently the mood of the area will contribute to this as well, but I didn't think so, it just feels completely random. You rinse and repeat this until the Kegai invades. You see, Loop 8 operates in an endless August where Nini is attempting to break fate or something like that to end the loop. But the month of August itself is effectively split into 6 mini loops of about 5 days each. These translate into a total of 6 Kegai bosses to defeat to end the game. Your main goal during those 5-day periods is to build your relationships enough with the other characters so that when the Kegai attacks and you need to fight, you are strong enough to defeat them. On the 4th day, the Kegai will open up an underworld portal. Nini can invite others to help him and traverse the other world. The underworld aesthetically is just the same Ashihara but with more trippy scenery. You get some Agatamas, unlock the boss gate, and hope that your stats are high enough. And this is what the game changes. Remember when the developers said that all of your playthroughs will be different and unique? It's not true. The only thing that changes is the order in which the bosses appear. Otherwise, it's completely the same with no variation to the events leading up to the fights either. It's ignorant at best and disingenuous at worst. Now this will be a good time to go over the combat. It looks like your standard turn-based affair, right? Well, not really. You only get control of Nini, the other two act autonomously. The only real strategy on offer is the use of Nini's demon sight, which allows him to see what everyone else is thinking, so you can get an idea of when they might buff you or when they might attack. The same holds true for the boss as well. The thing is though, you don't need to worry about this. My strategy for the first boss was exactly the same for the final boss. Use my most powerful ability 4 to 6 times and hope I outlast them. If I do, woohoo! I go on to the next 5-day cycle. If I fail, well, this is where the looping mechanic kicks in. When you die, and trust me, you will die at least once, you are pushed all the way back to the beginning of August. It doesn't matter what loop you are on, how close to the end of the game you were, you die once, it's game over, and back the hell you go. This Neuron resets everything. All of your relationships, your dialogue, your stats, pretty much everything is switched back to 0. The only thing that carries over are the blessings. Periodically, as you walk around the map or talk to the others, these Momonga looking things that are apparently messengers of the gods will bestow a blessing on you, which generally functions as a stat boost. The more of these you get, the easier the next loop will become. It's in your interest to get as many of these as you can, and that generally means you need to get stuck into the dialogue. The real issue with this looping mechanic though is that the game is not tailored to make that loop back enjoyable. The dialogue, for example, you will have to repeat all of it, and outside of a fast forward option on the PC version, there is no way to skip past the dialogue you've seen before. In visual novels at least that have multiple paths, you at least have the option to skip past all of the stuff you've seen and it will stop as soon as it detects something unique. Loop 8 desperately needed this, especially if it was going for this emotional driven AI system that requires an ungodly amount of dialogue to make it tick. For the record, I finished this game on my 3rd loop. The game requires you to die at least once to demonstrate the mechanic. I died one more time after that, and finally got to the end on my 3rd one. By the end of that 3rd loop, I just wanted it to be done. It was horrible to play through, and I purely made myself finish it out of spite, because I wanted to deceive myself that Loop 8 was actually worth the time and money. The more I played, the more I came to dislike it. Oh, and the ending, right. Without spoiling, there are 3 endings that I remember, 2 bad and 1 true. However, to get the true ending, bear in mind, this is a game all about relationships with other characters. To get the true ending, you have to get close to a particular character. It's obvious who this character is, they are pretty much front and center the entire game. Regardless, if you want that ending but don't like the character, tough. You don't get a choice in the matter. The game gives you the illusion of choice, but pretty clearly wants you to go down a certain path. Not cool. And there's so many other things wrong with it, but I'll keep my last complaint short for the sake of length because this is already over 2 pages long. The game feels unfinished in that characters who get stat boosts via blessings, suggesting that they can fight with you, will pussy out before you go into the underworld. What is the point in giving them the stat boost then? The story makes no sense. Characters talk to you as if they're some long-lost relative, but the background is never explained in any satisfying way. No cutscene, no flashback, just this visual novel style presentation near on the whole way through, which, let me reiterate, there is nothing wrong with visual novel representation, but the writing has to actually make that up. It doesn't, okay? The writing is just wooden, boring, whatever. Every negative you can think of applies to this dialogue here. Nini runs like a grandma around town. People will interrupt you when you're trying to talk to others just to tell you you're a prick. The blessing dialogue is always the same and you'll be seeing it all the time with no way to skip it, and there's so many other player hostile choices. I'm certain the developers hated their target audience. Loop 8 feels like it was trying to be far more than what it eventually became. Initially, it needed way more time in the oven because it's clear that some aspects of the game were just not finished. But even if it had that time and budget allocated to it, it was doomed from the start because its core foundation, the looping mechanic, was flawed anyway. It has all of the characteristics of other genres yet excels at none of them. It won't appeal to RPG fans, it won't appeal to visual novel fans, and it won't appeal to dating sim fans. Because even though Loop 8 has all of these areas covered, the mechanics centered around those genres have the depth of a Big Mac at a gourmet burger tasting contest. The game would have been far better off as an outright dating sim or an outright visual novel, because you can see they overstretched. This is clearly a case of ambition outstripping talent. The development team were not talented enough to deliver on their ultimate goal. And that makes me worried about the other games they're talking about, the likes of Project Life is RPG and Project Magia. What are they going to do with those? Without question, Loop 8 is one of the most disappointing games I've played this year, and it will remain as such 5 years down the line too. A game that promised so much and had a massive amount of potential, but completely failed to present that. With no cohesion, no depth, and more importantly, no fun, it is not worth its £45 asking price, not even a third of that. Well, at least we're ending with a good one. The last game I played was Monster Hunter Stories 2, played on Switch, though I would suggest playing on PC if you can, and I'm still playing it as we speak with around 35 hours clocked. And what a great little game. I went in depth for this on my underrated RPGs list a couple of weeks back, so if you want my full thoughts, you can check that out. But I'll give a short rundown here in the meantime. Monster Hunter Stories 2 is a spin-off title, and plays more like a traditional RPG with turn-based combat, equipment management, and a focused story. And no, you don't need to play the first game to enjoy this one. The land is split into semi-open style zones, and you work with a host of monsties to traverse the world. These creatures mostly come from monster dens. You go in, find the egg, hatch it, and raise it as your own, and each monstie comes with their own skill sets and overmap abilities. This diversity becomes massively important in terms of succeeding in combat as well. Though you only get control of your protag, you at least get a sizable amount of options to compensate, like switching weapons and choosing body parts to attack. You also have this rock, paper, scissors style of attacking split between power, speed and technical that operates as a sort of weapons triangle. For example, if you attack with speed and the enemy attacks with power, you gain the advantage and deal more damage. Before you make your move, you can see what other members of the party will do too, including the enemy. If you match up your attack type with a monster, you can do a dual attack which deals heavy damage but also cancels an enemy's turn completely. There's a lot of depth to this system, especially when considering the equipment management too, but I found it very fun to play around with. Negatives? Not many, but I'll go over them a bit. It does struggle on the Switch performance-wise, Naviroo is annoying as hell, and the dungeon designs can get repetitive. But on the whole, Monster Hunter Stories 2 is an excellent RPG, one I'd wager a few people might not even know about. And if you have the platform available to you, give thought to trying it out. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe for more JRPG content, and consider joining my Patreon if you're interested. Peace.